I made a huge mistake several years ago while I was testing out a lot of drought-tolerant, heat-tolerant summer cover crops for pigs to graze. If I had gone with my first impression, I would not be grazing pigs on one of the best summer cover crop mixes around. You see, I ran a couple tests with Red Ripper cowpeas, Chinese red cowpeas, and Forage soybeans. And at first, the Forage soybeans did not seem to perform very well in that test. But I continued to give them another shot, and what I found completely changed how I graze my pigs in the summer. I'm Rob from Dowdle Family Farms, and I'm on a mission to grow the best, most nutritious, healthiest pork possible for my family and our customers, and I want to help other people do that as well. That's why we graze our pigs on cover crops, to lower feed costs, to regenerate our farm soils, and most importantly, to create healthier pork. Many different studies have suggested that the most diverse crops that pigs graze, the more it improves the quality of the fat, the health of the fat, and the health of the animals. Further, the more diverse forages that livestock consume, they're also so much healthier. And it stands to reason that the meat that they produce is so much healthier as well. So for pigs to thrive on pasture, they need diverse, nutrient-rich forages, especially forages that are high in protein and especially lysine. Now, it's also important that the forages that the pigs are grazing, or the grains that the pigs are grazing, are grown in healthier soils. The healthier the soils the crops are grown in, the healthier the plants are as well, and further, the healthier the livestock that graze those plants. That's why we're so focused on improving the soils on our farm. And we plant a variety of cover crops, legumes like red clover, white clover, Alsike clover, and Austrian winter peas, grasses like cereal rice, sorghum Sudan grass, hybrid pearl millets, brassicas like turnips and kale, forbs like buckwheat and chicory, Boston plantain, yellow dock, and many others. In Mississippi, though, most of these highly nutritious forages only grow in the winter and the early spring. In the cooler parts of the U.S., they last all summer long. But once Mississippi's summer heat sets in, most of these crops struggle and my grazing options become very limited. In fact, right now, it's over 70 degrees in February. That's Mississippi weather for you. I needed to find a crop that could handle the heat while still providing a nutritional boost to my pigs. Now, some grasses like sorghum Sudan grass and hybrid pearl millet can handle the summer and the dry weather. Chicory, a forb, performs really well in the summer as well, and it adds protein and especially a lot of trace minerals that other crops do not have because chicory has a really deep taproot. Buckwheat increases the lysine and the energy, but it's not very drought tolerant, and it struggles in extreme heat. But it still produces some good forage in the early mornings of the day during the summer. I knew I needed more summer legumes for several reasons. One, legumes fix nitrogen and they help build soil health. They also help reduce our reliance on commercial fertilizers because they offer some nitrogen and other things to the mix. Also, legumes generally are higher in protein. Protein, especially amino acids and other essential amino acids, are very critical for pig growth because pigs grow so rapidly. There just aren't that many available options for heat-tolerant grazing legumes in Mississippi during that hot, dry summer heat. We have soybeans are one option, and so are cowpeas. But which ones would be better? Would my pigs prefer one or the other? Would they regrow very well after grazing? And would they be worth the effort in grazing them? And would they even work in a cover crop mix with other highly competitive plants? Over a year and a half ago, I ran a side-by-side test. I planted a Forage soybeans and two different types of cowpeas, the Red Ripper cowpeas and Chinese red cowpeas, in the middle of my warm season forage mix. It included things like some brassicas, sorghum Sudan grass, hybrid pearl millet, and many others. My goal was simple, to see which one would perform best for my pigs. At first, I thought the cowpeas were the clear winner. They established quickly, they handled the acidic soils better, and they regrew really well after grazing. In fact, I even published a video indicating that those kind of cowpeas were so much better and were the better choice. That's when I talked to our state extension office's forage expert, and he confirmed the issues with some Forage soybeans as well. He said they didn't seem to produce as much biomass as other options like cowpeas, and that lined up with what I saw firsthand. Forage soybeans just seemed to grow a little bit slower. They didn't seem to be growing as aggressively. And so after about 60 or 70 days, I was convinced that the cowpeas were the best option. But I had the forage soybeans and I found some cheaper seed and I continued planting them. And that's when I started noticing some differences. Those two cowpea varieties are great early season grazing, but their growth slowed down over time. They also went to seed earlier than these long day forage soybeans that I was working with. They worked well in fast growing mixes like brassicas and buckwheat and really competitive plants like sorghum sudan grass. But they didn't maintain steady forage production throughout the summer very well. In 60 to 80 days, they produced really good forage. But meanwhile, the forage soybeans that I planted with a bunch of sorghum sudan grass was doing something different. They were much slower to establish, but once they got growing, they kept producing a lot of forage throughout the summer and were climbing very tall in that sorghum sudan grass mix. Now, for that crop, I originally planted the forage soybeans just because they were a little bit cheaper, and I just wanted a nitrogen fixer with that sorghum sudan grass to help improve our pastures. I planned on finishing some beef on those forages. But let me back up to the cowpeas for a minute. Now, one of the biggest problems that I had with cowpeas wasn't the crop itself, it was just the availability. I don't have access to a good local source of red ripper cowpeas or Chinese red cowpeas. Again, I plant successive crops after the pigs are grazing, and so I need them here on site for about a 2-month window of time, maybe even 3 or 4 months. So getting them shipped in small allotments or in pallets and trying to store them on the farm was just not a good option for us. But the forage soybeans, we had a ready supply of those at our local co-op. We also had some iron and clay cowpeas accessible at our local co-op that deer hunters primarily plant. Iron and clay cowpeas perform really well over a long season. They don't regrow very well once they're grazed, and they are slow growers initially as well. But the iron and clay cowpeas, I don't know if it's because they're just a longer growing cowpea, they tend to get more lignous or have more cellulose or fiber or something in them, but the pigs just do not find them as palatable as the Chinese red or the red rippers, and certainly not as palatable as the forage soybeans. But almost 2 years ago now, in the summer of 2023, I had that crop of forage soybeans and sorghum sudan grass, and I had a group of pigs that I needed to put on pasture somewhere. And so rather than actually grazing the cows on that crop, I put our pigs in there, a group of 15 to 20 Mangalitsa cross feeder pigs in that paddock instead. For 7 weeks, they grazed an area about 2 acres. I cut their grain consumption by 90%, and they were still growing very well. They performed really well on that crop, gaining some weight. Again, they're Mangalitsa, so they're a slower growing breed anyway. But I've since had very similar results with our Berkshire-based genetics as well. Looking back, I think adding chicory and some buckwheat and even more crops in that mix, if I'd grazed it for pigs, would have been even better. But at the time, I was just trying to improve the soil more so than grazing pigs or even cows on that forage. And that test for me was the game changer between the availability of the forage soybeans, the heat tolerance, and the fact that my pigs preferred them over many of the cowpea varieties that we had. It was the clear winner for us. Now, I'll still add some cowpeas when they're available, along with some other crops in our warm season mix, but forage soybeans are by far the best crop that we've had for them. The other benefit of forage soybeans is that they help improve our farm's worn out soils. They're fairly deeply rooted, they help supply nitrogen to other crops, and as the pigs graze them and they regrow, we add organic matter either through the crop residue or the manure that the pigs return back to the soil. Last winter, we barely grew any good forage on this field behind me. The cereal rye, the daikon radish, the Austrian winter peas, and many other winter crops that we planted out here really struggled. This year, in large part because of our warm season cover crop mix, which forage soybeans are a critical component of, play a huge role in helping build the fertility of our soils. Now, the soil health benefits that we've received aren't because of just forage soybeans alone, but as part of a very diverse cover crop mix. During the warm season, they work wonders. Now, in this field, I've just planted it after I moved the pigs off of it, but I want to just take a moment to show you what the soil looks like here. You can see that darker colored soil versus that red clay that the pigs rooted up from right there. This entire field was that pure red clay, and it only had that dark soil maybe in the top quarter of an inch. But this year the soil looked so much better. You can also see another comparison as well. The combination of the mixed cover crop, which forage soybeans are a critical component of, grazing the pigs on it 3 or 4 times throughout the summer, has allowed us to grow a much better cool season cover crop this year than we were able to grow last year. I just can't say enough how important forage soybeans are. Let me just offer a few little technical details and address a couple concerns as well. First, pigs grazing forage soybeans will get a boost of protein. It's usually the protein content. It depends on the maturity level of the forage soybeans, but it can range between 15 and 24%. Now the lysine is going to be lower, about 3.5% of that total protein. I don't recommend grazing any crop solo, but forage soybeans especially work really well as a component of that warm season cover crop mix, along with things like chicory, curly dock, a few leftover clovers if they're still blooming, some brassicas, sorghum, sudan grass, hybrid pearl millet, and others. Now there are 2 primary concerns that most people have with soybeans, and most of those are related to the grain. First, soybeans have some anti-nutritional factors like trypsin inhibitors that reduce animal performance. That's only in the seed, and most of the time those seeds or the grain is heat treated to destroy those attributes. Secondly, there's some concern over estrogen mimicking hormones in soybeans. I'm not sure that the evidence is there. If you're using soybean meal that's heat treated, those numbers are reduced some. But neither of these compounds exist at very high levels in the forage of the plant. They're mostly concentrated to the grains. If you're interested in more information on forage beans, I'd suggest giving it a try or take a look at our blog for more information. Raising pigs on pasture isn't just about saving money on grain. It's about building soil health, raising healthier animals, and producing much better food. Figuring out what works isn't necessarily easy. But when we test things out in the field and let our animals tell us what they actually prefer, we get much better results. If you're interested in trying some of our pasture pork, let me encourage you to check it out at dowdlefamilyfarms.com. You can sign up for our farm newsletter to stay updated. Y'all take care and have a great day.